Good afternoon, everybody. This is Olivine Thomas from the HRD unit. I don't see the dean or Miss Pinnock here, so I'll just start. I want to welcome everybody to the Faculty of Social Sciences and the HRD unit Turnitin training session. I want to thank everybody for attending, but of course, I want to specially thank our two speakers, Dr. Alicia Palmer and Miss Yolanda Tugwell, who are librarians from the main library at the University of the West Indies Mona campus. Really thank these ladies for coming to us here in their spare time and teaching us, helping us in the Faculty of Social Sciences to maintain the standards that we're becoming very proud of. So, Dr. Palmer and Ms. Tugwell, I'll hand over to you now.
Thank you, Ms. Thomas. Good afternoon, everyone. As was said earlier, we're from the UWI Mona Library, and this evening we'll be sharing with you some of the features of Turnitin. So Turnitin has been touted as a plagiarism detection software, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. For this session, there are several things we'll be looking at. We'll touch a little bit on UWI Mona's plagiarism policy. We'll go into how a lecturer can create an account. We'll also look at adding a course, uploading the assignments for students, and we'll talk a little bit more about how students can upload assignments themselves. We'll look at the originality reports, as well as how we go about interpreting these reports. And of course, we also want to talk about the types of documents that you can upload to Turnitin. So let's really begin. So UWI's definition of plagiarism is a very comprehensive one, and it basically talks about the various ways that we can plagiarize. So for example, not acknowledging the words or works of others, and this can mean anything as simple as paraphrasing somebody's work, but it's done in a cosmetic way. It's also using diagrams and opinions that belong to someone else, but without proper attribution. All right, so those are examples of plagiarism as defined by the UWI. Now, you can also plagiarize your own work. So for example, if you had submitted or written something before and you represent this new work as if it was never done before, or you quote from this new work without actually citing that this was something that was published or written or created by you before, that's also an example of plagiarism. So we want to be very careful about that. Now, what exactly is Turnitin? Turnitin is a software that has been around since 1997. It's a software that was created by an American company, and the aim of the software is to basically provide you with enough information to make the determination about whether or not plagiarism has occurred. Now, it's important to note that Turnitin does not tell you that by looking at an individual's sample of work that plagiarism has occurred. What Turnitin will do is provide you with what we call like a similarity index, which says X percentage of this information is from a specific source, and Turnitin will provide you with details on that source. So it's always going to be up to the instructor to determine, based on the definitions that we have of what plagiarism entails, if plagiarism has occurred. So Turnitin will never tell you that this work has been plagiarized, but it will show you the index of how many similarities have been found in this bit of documentation or this paper that has been submitted. I want to make very clear that actually using the Turnitin software, it's not very difficult to use. It looks very overwhelming because there's a lot of information available, but I just want to make you aware that it's something that is pretty easy to use, and as we go through, at the end of this session, it is our hope that we can at least log into Turnitin and kind of show you what it looks from the instructor's standpoint or the lecturer's standpoint, and we'll talk a little bit as well about the students' perspective of Turnitin. So the most important thing when using Turnitin is to ensure that you have an account. For lecturers at the UWI, one of the ways that you get access to Turnitin is by getting your credentials from MITS. And I'll share with you in a moment the contact details that you will need to request this information. Now, there are 3 types of accounts that can be created on Turnitin. There's a student account, the teaching assistant account, and what is called an instructor account. So these accounts are the 3 basic types of account, and for our purposes, we're looking at the student and the instructor account. Now, it must be noted that a student account does not exist independent of the instructor's account. What this means is that in order for a student to get access to Turnitin, it is the lecturer who has to send out this information. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Now, to join Turnitin as an instructor, as I hinted at before, you will need to contact the Turnitin administrator at UWI. And for our purposes, this administrator can be reached at elearning@uwimona.edu.jm. Once you have made this contact, you'll write an email stating that I would like to get access to Use Turnitin account. And what will happen is that the administrator will provide you with an instruction email that tells you exactly what to do in order to set up your account. Now, you'll get this information that says, check your email, and the subject line should show your Turnitin instructor account. You're going to click on the Get Started button, and the instructions are very intuitive because it will tell you what you need to do to set up, in essence, what is considered your account page. Now, once in your email, you will see the caption, Create Your Turnitin Account. You'll follow the link that has been provided. You'll create a password, and this password will be of your choosing. But what is important is that you must have a password that is not easily accessible, so typically between 6 to 12 characters in length, and you want to make sure that no one is able to access your account very quickly. And that's as simple as, that's a simple process of getting into Turnitin in your Turnitin account. Now, this is essentially what you will see. This is what you're seeing on your screen is the login page for Turnitin. Now, this login page, you will put in your email address and your password that you created previously. And this is if you had a Turnitin account before. But if you don't have a Turnitin account, then what you will do is you'll click on the new user icon. And if you notice, right beside the new user icon, you will see click here. You'll click on that link, and it will take you into signing up for Turnitin. And of course, you use the credentials that you were provided by the university's Turnitin administrator. Now, one of the main reasons we are using Turnitin is because we want to be able to check our students' work to ensure that we can make the determination of whether or not they have plagiarized. In order to do this, we need to create what is called a class in Turnitin. Once you log into your account, and I'll show you as soon as I'm done going through this presentation, what you'll see is an Add Class button, and this will allow you to start creating a class. Once that has been done, you're going to create a new class page, and a class name and enrollment key will be entered. You will choose what your class name is, and you will choose what your enrollment key is. Now, the class name can be your the class that you're teaching. You decide if you want to use the exact name of the class, a shortened version, of the class's name, and then you will choose an enrollment key. It can be any number or character that you choose. And once you have done that, that will be your class name and enrollment key for that class that you have created. You're also able to create more than one class in your Turnitin account. So say, for example, you're teaching 3 or 4 different classes, and you want content or information or assignments that have been submitted, you want them submitted to that specific class, then you will create a Turnitin class for those submissions. So you can have several classes at the same time in your Turnitin assignment, or a Turnitin classroom, sorry. Now, it's important to note that each class has a start date and an end date. Typically, your start date will be the date that you created that class, and the end date will be your choosing. Now, Turnitin typically defaults to 6 months because the expectation is that after 6 months, a class would have ended anyway. So you want to pay keen attention that your end date is not shorter than the duration of your class. Once you have filled in that information, then you're going to hit submit, and what you have done is you have created a class in Turnitin. Now, your class ID and enrollment key are very important. Once you have created that class, the class ID and the enrollment key will always be available to you. And there are several ways that you can allow students to have access to this information so that they can get a profile in Turnitin. You can email your students from within Turnitin, or you can tell your students what the class ID is and enrollment key. The easier process might be to email students from within Turnitin, but this would mean that you would have to ensure that you have your students added to your class, right? And we can talk a little bit about that in a bit. Now, you have created your class. How did you get to create your class? The first thing you had to do was to ensure that you got permission from you as Turnitin administrator to create an account. You created your account, you chose your password, you logged in, and then once you logged in, you went on to create a class. But the class is of no use if you're not able to have students submit their assignments. And so you will need to create an assignment in Turnitin, because when students upload their information or upload their assignments, what they're uploading their assignments to is that particular assignment that you have created in your Turnitin account. Now, how do I do this? Once you're in your Turnitin page, there's an Add Assignment button. Turnitin is set up in such a way that the buttons and icons that you need to see, or you need to see in order to be able to create your assignments and create your class, they're easily accessible, and as you enter Turnitin, you'll see them. So you won't have to search for it, because as you log in, create your classroom, and create your assignment, you will see the icons that you need to use to make it work for you. Now, Turnitin requires that you enter an assignment title. So in essence, you're creating this assignment. So you'll enter a title, you'll choose a start date and due date for the submission of that assignment. Now, you have to be careful with this, with the end dates for the assignment, because if the end date of the assignment is sooner than you would like your students to submit, when a student goes after the date, so say for example, you have told your students that you would want them to submit their assignments by the 30th of May, but you forgot to adjust the due date to the 30th, but you had the 15th instead. When the student goes to submit that assignment, they would not be allowed to submit. So we have to pay specific attention to the start date and the due date for the assignment. Now, by default, Turnitin will say, okay, allow only the file types that Turnitin can check for similarities. So in other words, we know that there are different types of files that individuals can create, and automatically Turnitin has pre-selected this, where you only allow file types that can be checked for similarity. Now you can choose to uncheck that option, meaning that you can say, okay, it doesn't matter what file type my student uses, I want to still allow them to submit it. Or you can do, as Turnitin has suggested, that you check the icon that says only allow those file types that Turnitin can check for similarity. Now, since we're using the service for similarity check, it would be much easier for you to just leave the default option. Now, there are different types of assignments that can be created in Turnitin, but the license that UE has doesn't allow for certain types of grading or marking, and I'll talk about that in a bit. Essentially, what UE has is Turnitin, that the Turnitin license that we have only allows us to check for similarity. In other words, when the assignment is uploaded, you can check for your similarity report. You can see how many times this individual's work has been found elsewhere. You can download the report, you can upload an assignment, but the grading features that are available in Turnitin, we do not currently have those turned on. So we use Turnitin just for checking to ensure that our students are not plagiarizing. Now, as I mentioned before, an individual might opt to upload different file types. Now, here are some common file types that Turnitin accepts. For the most part, many students use Word documents, Microsoft Word documents, or they'll upload PDFs, but Turnitin allows you to also upload other types, and these are listed here. We have the rich text format, WordPerfect, HTML, but I think to make it much simpler for our students, we might want to just stick to Microsoft Word and PDFs. Now, UII does not have licenses to really allow all students to upload their assignments to Turnitin. So I want to kind of emphasize that. So what happens is that an instructor or a lecturer can opt to upload a student's assignment, or they can allow students to upload the assignments from their profiles. So I just want to make that very clear. All right, but just in case you want to submit an assignment for your student, this is the main way that you would do it. In your Turnitin account, you will see a submit paper button, and it's typically to the right of the assignment link, and a drop-down box will be provided. You'll state the name of the student, you'll give a title to the paper, and this will typically be based on what title the student has used, and then you'll have an option of uploading the paper, which essentially means clicking the upload button to upload the paper. You'll pick from either your computers, from your desktop, Dropbox, or Google Drive. Those are the three locations that Turnitin allows you to pull documents from to upload into Turnitin: Dropbox, your computer, and Google Drive. And for the most part, that's pretty easy to access. Everything is a drop-down menu, and you'll see the options. So for example, for Google Drive, you'll see an icon with Google Drive, and it will allow you to click on it, and it will open Google Drive on your computer. The same goes for Dropbox if you have a Dropbox account. In no way are you being advised to get a Dropbox account or get a Google Drive account. You can upload the material or the assignment from your computer. That's perfectly acceptable. Once you're finished, click the upload button, and you have uploaded the paper. Now, I know you might have questions about, do I get a receipt when I upload? If an instructor or lecturer decides to upload a paper for a student, every time you upload a paper, Turnitin provides you with a receipt. There are two ways that you can access that receipt. You can highlight, or you can copy the receipt and save it, or you can go back to the assignment icon and click download. So there are different ways that you can get access to that receipt. So if, for example, you chose to upload an assignment for a student and you're wondering, how do I give this student a receipt? Turnitin does provide you with a receipt, and it's as simple as copy and pasting the content and emailing it to your student. And you can email from within Turnitin, or you can download the receipt. Similarly, when students upload a Turnitin document to Turnitin, they also get a receipt, and that receipt can be submitted to their lecturer to show that they actually did submit their assignment through Turnitin. All right. Now, Turnitin has what is called a feedback studio. Now, the feedback studio has several features that are available for use. What we realized when we were preparing for this session was that many of these features are not accessible to us because the grading feature, we do not have a license for that. So we have included this information just to let you know about the range of options that are available within Turnitin, and the feedback studio is one of them. So you will have access to the feedback studio, but you'll basically be using the feedback studio only for looking at the similarity reports. So once an assignment is uploaded, you will be placed in the feedback studio. It's just that the grading aspect of the feedback studio is not accessible to us here at UWI. And those are licensing issues. So only certain features of Turnitin are available. Similar to Moodle or VLE container, only the features that are relevant to us would be selected, for example. Now, you're wondering, what is the originality check? Now, the originality check is basically the process that Turnitin uses to check information that has been submitted or papers that have been submitted against publicly accessible files. So imagine uploading a document to Turnitin. Once it is uploaded, after a few moments, it doesn't happen automatically. It takes some time and you'll have to refresh. What you'll find is that Turnitin will check this document against other sources of information that's available. So for example, it will check journals, it will check documents that have been submitted to other universities, it will check documents that have been submitted to Turnitin. And when we talk about documents that have been submitted to other universities, we're talking about their use of Turnitin. So if their students submit a paper and for some reason, and we hope our students won't do that, but one of our students happens to have submitted the same paper, Turnitin will pick that up. It will flag it as being something that has been taken from another source. And it will tell you the percentage of the information that comes from that source. Turnitin also gives you the option to contact that institution. The only drawback is that if you make a request to see the document that the student has such a large similarity percentage from, Turnitin won't show you that document. What they will do is they will make a request on your behalf stating that you would like to have access to that documentation. And then once it is available, if it's made available, then they will inform you of that. Now, the percentages that you see when you are looking at your match overview, what is this all about? it is important to note that Turnitin does not check for plagiarism. I want to make that absolutely clear. Even though it's touted as a plagiarism detection software, and yes, Turnitin does allow you to detect plagiarism, Turnitin doesn't check for plagiarism. So similarity and plagiarism don't necessarily mean the same thing. What Turnitin does is think of it as a database that is running your assignments to check to see if it occurs in any other database or in any other journals, in any other website. That is what Turnitin is doing. You have to make that determination as to whether or not plagiarism has occurred. Turnitin will not tell you that. And I'll talk a little bit more about the percentages in a moment, because it's helpful to have lecturers determine what is considered plagiarism for them. And this is an individual thing, and I'll tell you why I say that. Say a student has submitted a paper, and in setting up your assignment, you didn't exclude for certain things like reference lists and so on. The student's reference list would automatically come up as something that has a high similarity index, because these are works that have been done before, and obviously Turnitin will pick that up. And so these are a few nuances that one has to pay attention to when using Turnitin. So first we have to make a determination of what percentage would be considered plagiarism, and there are several factors that we have to look at. So once Turnitin has checked these websites and journals, and it has access to information from a wide range of journals. I can't really tell you what those journals are, but it touts itself as having access to a wide range of journals. So if a student plagiarizes, Turnitin will pick that up as a similarity, and it will be up to the lecturer to look at that particular percentage to see if it's a case that the student was quoting directly, but they did not cite their source or cite correctly, use the proper citation method. And if that's the case, then that would be plagiarism. All right, let's continue. Now, in order to interpret the similarity report, what Turnitin does is it uses a color coding system. And the colors are blue, green, yellow, orange, and red. So let's start off with blue. It is not likely that a student will ever get no matching text. It's not likely. Once a student has cited his or her paper correctly, there's always something that's going to come up as a similarity. Because in essence, there's no new information that the student would have presented without citing other sources of information. So while a section in that document might be presented as blue, the entire document will never produce a no match. And that is what blue essentially means. Some individuals have said that if a student's assignment ranges from 1 word to 24% in terms of matching text, that means that the student has not plagiarized. One can argue that by being within the 0 or the 1 word to 49% range, you could pretty much be safe and say that the student has a high likelihood of not plagiarizing. But the issue with that is that in order to make that determination, you would need to look at the text itself to see where these high percentages are coming from. You can't say that because a student only gets a 24% matching text that the student has not plagiarized. So what will happen is that you will need to look at the text itself to see, is it a reference that the person is coming up with this 24% match? Is it a series of references? Is it that the person has copied and pasted information from a source? Is it that the person has copied wholesale information from somewhere else? You won't know until you look at the information. Turnitin will not interpret that for you. You will need to make that determination. Say a student has a 50% matching text in one section of a paper. But when the lecturer looks at the paper, they realize that the student was doing what is called a direct quotation or the direct quote. And it happened to be a direct quote from a source, and they quoted it correctly and so on. But this particular example would show that the student has not plagiarized because they have cited the work correctly. Would you then say that because the person had a 50 to 74% match that they have plagiarized? One would have to double check the entire paper to see what else is coming up as something that has not been correctly cited. Because if a student has not cited the work correctly or cited any at all, that is plagiarism. And so that determination has to be made by the lecturer. Now, the red zone, the red matching text, 75% to 100%. One could safely surmise that such a high index would mean that plagiarism has occurred. Because if you're seeing a 100% matching index coming up for a student, right there, that's a red flag. I don't think you would even need to go and look any further, because it would mean that there's no original information in this paper, and all of this paper has been previously submitted before. So one would want to send that student to the drawing board. But again, it would kind of be in our best interest to double check to see what is going on within that paper. So just to recap, to be safe, the blue and green zones are typically okay, but we still need to check the information. It's less likely that the student would have plagiarized. Even accidental plagiarism is still plagiarism. The yellow to red zones, we need to be extra careful and double check to see where these similarity matches are occurring. Again, Turnitin will not tell you that your student has plagiarized. All right, let's look at some examples. Now, every student is unique in terms of the interpretation of their work. So what do I mean by this? A student could have submitted a paper to your class before in the past, and it was submitted to Turnitin. But if they had their name on the submission, it is possible that if the lecturer, when setting up the assignment, does not include for small matches, so say, for example, you could say you're giving your students 20 words or 10 words that could actually come up that have been used before. What would happen is that Turnitin would exclude these 10 words or these 10 matches, so the student's name would not show up as being similar. So in this case, to fix this issue, excluding 5 words, for example, would safely exclude a student's name from being highlighted in their similarity report. Now, Turnitin will not view simple words like at, it, but those small words as being words that are similar and likely to have been plagiarized. It won't look at those words. It's going to be looking at direct or exact phrases that have been used for the similarity index to be populated. Now, another example might be a student has submitted Turnitin. We know we have some of our students who are kind of worried about their assignments, and so they submit 3 or 4 times. This again could result in a 100% score, which in essence, the lecturer wouldn't have to look at the paper again. They would probably say, oh, this is 100%, there's no way the student has not plagiarized. But because the student submitted on multiple occasions, it's going to show that. And so what would likely happen is that the lecturer could exclude the previous submissions, or you could delete the submissions that have been done before and leave only one submission and then rerun that report so that you don't get that 100% similarity. All right. Now, Turnitin allows you to download your similarity report. As I said before, pretty much everything in Turnitin, the icons are easily accessible, and it will show you what you need to do to be able to download the information. But here's a quick run through. Once you open a submission, it opens in the feedback studio area, and there's an icon, which is basically a down arrow. And what it will do is once you click on it, it will allow you to download the Similarity report. Now, in terms of what the report will entail, the report will tell you what is the percentage of the similarity that has occurred in this assignment, all right? And it will also show you the color codes, and you can compare it to the rest of the document, and it will allow you to kind of match the rest of the paper to see what is going on. Again, Turnitin provides a very simple document that shows you, okay, here's the percentage of similarity that has occurred, and the lecturer has to make that determination as to what plagiarism means for this particular paper. An 87% similarity index or 87% similarity means that the lecturer will have to look at that paper keenly. And it is extremely likely that a student has plagiarized if you have such a high index. But again, Turnitin will not tell you that your student has plagiarized. That is a determination that you will have to make in terms of what percentage would be considered plagiarism. And you can click on each source that has been considered too similar or the similarity index comes up for. Now, let's look at this example of what is called a match overview. In shortened form, the match overview tells you, one, the sources of information that have produced a similarity index. It also gives you a color code, and it also tells you the percentage. Now, if you look to the left of the match overview box, you'll see a few icons. Now, in this example, you will see what looks like a paper and a pen, and that would allow you to kind of allow for grading and making comments. Again, that grade feature is not in our Turnitin license, and so even though it's showing up here, when you go into Turnitin, some of those features would not show up. So the areas that would be of interest to you would be the match overview with the percentages and the options to download the paper. And at the bottom, just below 43, that is where you will see that option to download your similarity report. Now, you can click on the numerical similarity score from the similarity toolbar. And what it does is once you click on it, you will see the text highlighted, and you can also get more information as to where that text comes from. Turnitin is very good in terms of telling you the source of information. And if you need to get more information to access that document that the similarity is based on, you can also get that information. Now, I have here an example of a paper that has been submitted. I found that Turnitin did not have very good examples of a paper that highlighted the different colors and so on in terms of what the percentages mean. And so I wanted to show this example. Now, in this paper, there's a 58% match in terms of similarity. All right? So one would look at the various sources first to see if these are sources of information that our students should even be citing information from, as well as to determine why is our student having such a high similarity index from the document. Now, in this particular case, the student apparently wrote verbatim words that were taken from another source, and so it is showing up this in our similarity or match overview on the right of the document. So if you notice, there are no quotation marks for the most part, except for one small segment of the paper. And even though the student used quotation marks for a segment, they did not use any sources of information at all. And so it's likely that the student has plagiarized or taken information directly or stolen information from another source of information. Because once you have not cited this information, what you have done is you have stolen this information from somewhere else. And again, you always want to check your match index to see what is going on with that specific similarity. All right. I've talked a bit about the match breakdown. The match breakdown is pretty simple. It tells you where the source is from. Where is this information coming from? And what percentage of this paper is from this source? Now, in this particular example, the student would have got information from wikipedia.org. One would have to determine, has the student cited this information correctly? But another thing as well, we don't want our students citing from Wikipedia, because anybody with an opinion can upload material to Wikipedia and it becomes a source of information. So that's not typically something that we want our students to do anyway. So even if that student had quoted that information or cited that information perfectly, it would still be information that we'd probably want to tell our students to exclude, because that is not an appropriate source for us to be citing credible information, what we consider to be credible information. All right, again, let's look at this example. What you're seeing on your screen is what is called a source box. And what it is that it appears on the paper and it reveals the source of the information. And this is just a more specific example of the student getting information from wikipedia.org, and this source box is just providing you with that information. You can click on it and it will take you directly to the source. Right. So in a nutshell, those are the basic areas of Turnitin. So before I go on to log into Turnitin itself, if there are any questions, I can take a few of those questions, and then I'm going to attempt to show you a practical example of logging into Turnitin and creating an assignment.
I just had a small question. I just wanted you to confirm for me that you said you could, so one lecturer who teaches 2 or 3 courses can have 2 or 3 classes simultaneously in Turnitin.
Yes, you can, because what you're doing is you're creating a class. So there's an, yes, there's an option. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying I wasn't clear. It sounded as if like you had to create a big class and then create some subclasses. Is that how it worked?
No, it's not really a subclass. So what happens is when you log into Turnitin, you're going to see the University of the West Indies. So that's the institution. And then you're going to go in and you're going to create a class. But there's also the option to create other classes. So if I have a class called Educational Technology, for example, my educational technology students can submit their assignments to that, because I'd send them the credentials and the information for that. But then I could also create an assignment or create a class for another group of students that would have another name. Are you understanding what I'm saying?
I am hoping I'll see it when you're doing the demonstration. But we do have some other questions. Enid Bessemer is asking, what about quotations from newspapers? Are those acceptable? And I thought I saw another one.
Can I or should I put up my hand?
Well, Dr. Palmer, what about the newspapers? Are those acceptable?
So newspapers can be an acceptable source of information. It depends on what type of newspaper. So for example, in our Jamaican context, if you look at the Gleaner versus the Star, the Gleaner or the Observer would probably be considered a more credible source of information, whereas the Star would not necessarily be so. But that's not really a Turnitin. That's not really a Turnitin question. That's more a sources of information question.
Okay.
But yes, yeah, newspapers can be used. It depends on the credibility of the newspaper.
All right, I see Denny.
All
Denny
right,
has
can
a
I?
question. And I see Trevor Smith.
Okay.
Denny, what about you?
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
So when you submit your paper, are you given time to correct it? Because, I mean, do you get like a test run? See
I'm
if
not, no, I'm
mistake?
not aware of a test run being provided, but a student could also always ask a lecturer if they can resubmit.
Okay.
Dr.
Because
Smith?
because maybe the student didn't intentionally, well, the score might be high, although
Mhm,
you didn't steal any information, but you would like to
mhm.
see what errors you made or whatever.
All right, so
Correction.
in the example that I gave of a student who had the 100% score, the reason for that was that the student had submitted the assignment over and over. So in that particular case, the student had been allowed to submit the assignment several times. And so the lecturer would have had to delete those assignments in order for them to run another report and get a lower similarity index. Typically, you wouldn't advise students to submit their paper until they are ready to submit. The hope would be that the student would be paying particular attention to citing sources correctly. And so by the time they get to the point of submitting, they would have correctly cited their information, and so avoid the issue of having a large similarity index because they have submitted several times. I don't know if that answers your question.
Okay. I
All
just
right.
think if this required score is like 20% and you are 25, that
Mhm.
is sort of close.
All right, so if you get a similarity index of 25%, as I said before, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have plagiarized. And so it's always going to be dependent on the lecturer to double check to see why is this percentage showing up? Because it doesn't necessarily mean that the student has plagiarized. It could mean that the lecturer did not exclude for small words, for example, or the reference list is coming up as something that has been found somewhere else. So that's where the similarity is coming in, and so the high number. And so you can't just look at a percentage and say, yes, the student has plagiarized because you see a high similarity index. In only cases where you see probably 50 to 100%, you might be saying, oh, the student has likely plagiarized, but you still would have to go and look at it to see what's going on.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. So, all right. I'm just thinking. Yeah, I'm thinking here about the inexact science in Turnitin.
Right.
And I'm wondering here,
Mm-hmm.
can I beat Turnitin by copying a phrase verbatim and then from a document and add simple words like and or at, so as to, because I know Turnitin doesn't check those simple words, so as to keep it in the blue or the green zone.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm copying the phrase, right? I'm stealing the phrase from elsewhere. And then I put in some at or an R or 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 some simple words so as to change the phrase. Couldn't I beat Turnitin in that way?
It's not very likely, because even though you're adding those small words, the bigger portion of what you have presented is a verbatim copy of information that you have taken from elsewhere. So
No,
it's
see, I
going
present like a phrase with 5 words. It just looks nice from somewhere, and I just use those 5 words, and then I punctuate it with and or something like that to change it up slightly. I'm using somebody else's phrase.
Cosmetic paraphrasing.
Yeah, that would be
Cosmetic. Wouldn't I be able to know, get into the green zone, so to speak, or the blue zone by manipulating that? Because, I just wondered if you can manipulate it. It just looks to me something that can be manipulated. Or I could perhaps, instead of, for instance, I can do less referencing, less citation per se. I could do less citation so that it keeps me in one of the lower zones. And then I change up words in between to keep, it looked to me like something that can easily be manipulated. I would love to check it in terms of do some exploratory on Turnitin. Has any exploratory been done in terms of how you can manipulate it? Because it looks like that to me, But tell me, what has been your experience with all of the manipulation of it? Spamo? Hello?
One of the things I would say though, Doc, is that I think Turnitin might only be one means by which assignments are checked. You would think that the lecturer also knows the literature. So if you were to be putting things in, you would think that the lecturer may have read those sources or some of them. If it is something, but the point is though that the lecturer should be also able to give a judgment. That's my thought on it. When I have had to grade papers, I also have a sense of what the students have done. In fact, sometimes when I think it is too good, I actually go on Google, just copy what they have done, put it in Google, and sometimes I found the source there because you can see the unevenness in the writing. So I'm just thinking Turnitin might only be one tool that you use.
But isn't it too much work for you to be using Turnitin and then go Google to find out again? Isn't it too much work for the lecturers?
Boy, Doc, I think it's, for me, the lesser of the two evils.
Olivine.
No, I was just saying that I think for me it's less of two evils. Rohan is saying something. Rohan has something to add to that.
Yeah, so to the point that Doc is questioning. So what I've actually seen is if the person puts the and simple words like those, because when the result comes, it brings back a string. So take, for example, it may read an entire sentence or an entire paragraph, and those words that are changed, the and stuff, may not necessarily appear, but when you look at an entire sentence appears, so you will also recognize that, these were the things that they did change in the text. If you follow what I'm saying.
Yeah, I'm understanding,
Right, so you will pick up, if it's two sentences, you will see a particular sequence that there is the same thing, but you'll also identify that, the word and was changed to something else, or another word was changed to something else. But in looking at the entire string, you will see the similarity there.
And
that's how I usually.
It could be very onerous on the part of the lecturer, because if you have to be doing that kind of forensic type of assessment to make sure, after having gone through the software, particularly in the case like us in Mona School, where we have large numbers in terms of our classes, and so it becomes a bit much.
I've not had to go to the extent that Olivine explained there in terms of looking back, in another search engine. But within Turnitin itself, as I say, you can see a particular pattern. So it picks up an entire sentence, an entire paragraph, 2 sentences, 3 sentences, and then can show if a word or two, or probably say 2, 3 words in a line were changed.
Right. And notably, I see where you can drop the reference list so as to, again, to keep your score within the green zone, dropping reference list and so forth. So as to
because I've seen that the reference list could be correct, but then if it's a widely sourced piece of reference, it will come up, it will be flagged, and it may increase that score that you don't want.
Percentages, yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Dr. Martin Hall, is there a size limit to the document that can be submitted in Turnitin? And Franklin Wapp is asking whether students quoting the lecturer, is that credible? So quoting their lecture notes, not necessarily some published work. Dr. Palmer?
Well, Olivine, well, Dr. Palmer, for the last, I don't know how to answer the first question, but for the last question, based on what I've seen using APA, it allows for it. So even probably Turnitin picks up that it may be the lecture note or personal note from the student. Some of that is taken into consideration or should be taken into consideration based on citation style.
Dr. Gatcher, I allow students to submit multiple times. This is a feature you can set when setting up assignments. Okay, so we've learned that. And June Pinto, is a student able to delete a previous submission, or does the lecturer have to do this for the student? Does anybody know? Doc?
Hi, Olivine.
Oh, hello.
This is not Doc, of course.
Uh-huh.
Having used it as a student, I recognize that when you're using it, when you're submitting, it allows you only one time to do so. It, as far as I know, depending on how the lecturer sets it. So sometimes I think you are asked to double check if everything is okay before you do so. But as it relates to when you're getting out of the zones, I think between blue and green, it allows you the opportunity to see where you may have plagiarized, whether deliberately or otherwise. So even if you put in some words like is and not and so on, it tends not to accept it. So in my case, I've had to actually reword the whole thing.
Hello, are you hearing me?
Yes, Doc, we're hearing you.
Hello,
Hello. Yes, Doc, we're hearing you.
Ms. Thomas?
Yes, Doc.
And that's Ms. Palmer
For some
who is
reason, I'm
speaking.
not hearing anything.
Oh dear. Dr. Palmer? Is Miss Tugwell still here then?
Hello? I'm not hearing anything, so I don't know if I have been muted on your end.
No, no, Doc. We're hearing you fine. We're hearing you.
Dr. Thomas, this is Yolanda Togwell. She's having some problems in terms of coming on.
Okay.
I think as the question relates to the submission being deleted by the student, as part of the presentation, we were going to show the instructor side of things and the student side of things, where the option being seen on the student side of things does not allow them to delete it, only to actually delete the class. That's what we're seeing based on our little demo that we had done.
Okay. So, all right. So is Dr. Palmer going to come back and do this, or do you want to do your part until she sorts out her IT?
So I'm signed in for the student part, so I can show what the student sees, since most persons inside in the session are actually lecturers. So I could actually just do that until she works that out. If not, what will happen is I can sign out as the student after that part, and if she still doesn't get in, I'll try to sign in as an instructor also.
Okay, all right.
So I'll share my screen.
Hello? Hello? I
Hi.
can't hear.
Hello,
Hi.
Miss.
Yes, hello.
You hearing us now?
All right, so,
Yes, we're hearing Miss Tugwell now.
right, so I'm actually signed in as a student on this end. But what had happened was Dr. Pam and I, she had actually sent me an invite, and she added me to her actual course. And what usually happens is the student will receive a welcome message, and they're able to actually set up their account. So with the password and the actual setup at the end, and they'll receive messages as they go along. So it's pretty easy, but you must have a class. So the first part of it that Dr. Palmer should have done, she'll do if she gets to come back on, has to do with the fact that she has to create the class. So once she creates the class is there for the student. She can offer to give the student the enrollment key, as it was indicated in the presentation, as well as the class ID. So if you notice from my screen, you're seeing my screen, right? Hello?
Yes, yes, we are.
Right. So on this side here, you notice that, so this was the class, the educational technology, and of course we have an instructor email there. And this is a class ID that would have been supplied by the lecturer. So you have the option when you log in as a lecturer to actually send the students emails. So you're able to send the students the class ID and the enrollment key, right? Other than that, you can actually add them in the container. Now from there, what happens is once they have been set up in the account, they have the option of actually seeing the tabs here. So all my classes, I'm only enrolled for one class, so it's only one class that is there. A question was asked earlier about whether you have to create sub-classes. No, each class has its individual identity, because when you're setting up, you choose the actual password. And from that, the software gives you the enrollment key and the class ID that can be used. It generates that for you, right? If you want to, the student has the option to of enrolling in the class. So if you see the tabs at the top left-hand corner there, they have the option of clicking on that says enroll in the class. So here's where they'd actually put in the class ID and the enrollment key there and submit, all right? Once this information has been submitted, they can contact their instructor. In addition to that, it has an option too where it says what is plagiarism, and it automatically goes to plagiarism.org. So the student is able to see that particular interface there. So of course, everything you have to be really connected to, to the internet to view that, all right? This is actually a support center that is there. It's a supportcenter.turnitin.com, because when you actually go into, let me go back to this here. When you're in the account, it says that you can actually get help, right? But for whatever reason, that key doesn't work very well. I don't know if something seems as if it has been disabled. So there's actually another screen that you can go, an actual website that you can go to get that information. You have the option of sending messages to the students. So at the top there, the students will see the messages that the instructor actually sends out. So they're there. So in my case, there are no announcements or messages. All right, for the user information, this is the section that the student can actually change their password. It also allows them at this point to change from single file upload to things like multiple file upload and so on. And if it's a zip file and so on. So it defaults to single file upload. That's really what happens with the thing. So if I go back to all classes, what happens here is if I click on the class, so this is a class that was created. So this is the assignment that was created. Once I click on the assignment here, this is the option here that tells you that you can actually submit. So the student is able to view the paper that they're going to be submitting. But what they do, if they click on submit here, this is the interface that they see. So they should really and truly, at this point in time, make sure that they really want to submit their paper, so they don't have the situation where that's not what they really wanted, and then they are not able to delete from their side. So the options are there to choose the file from your computer, to choose from Dropbox, or to choose from the Google Drive, right? If I go back here.
I have a question.
Yes.
The submit you're referring to there right now and from the student end, is that submit to the lecturer, or as
Yes, submit to the class.
Turnitin for review.
Submit to the class.
Because based on the discussion thus far, from what I recall, you would have at least one submission per 24-hour period.
Right.
So you could have submitted it to Turnitin, get the review, say the similarity that was required was 10%, you realize it's 15, and then you can go back, probably rephrase, edit, whatever the case may be, and resubmit within a next 24-hour cycle and get a different similarity index before you actually submit to the lecturer.
But when you go to submit, it would mean that I think you can only, the lecturer, if you submit, you're submitting for Turnitin to give you that report, the similarity report, based on what we understand from our end. And it is the lecturer now, if you end up not wanting that one, you would have to contact the lecturer to be able to remove that particular paper. There are no options here apart from dropping the class as far as we're seeing on our end.
But if you submit multiple times, doesn't it
It's so in Dr. Palmer's presentation, she pointed out that if the student submits multiple times, what will happen is that it's going to end up giving you 100% because it's seen that particular paper in the database already. So the previous submissions would have to be deleted by the lecturer so that only the current submission would be viewed by Turnitin.
Therefore, based on what you're saying, there's no option for the student to interact with Turnitin multiple times prior to submission to the lecturer.
Not that we are seeing on this end.
Okay, duly noted.
All right. So this is Dr. Palmer's. Dr. Palmer? Probably hasn't been able to on. So just allow me to come out of this one and
I'm here, Ms. Tugwell.
oh, you're here? Okay. So you'll do the other section?
Yeah, I'll share my screen.
Okay. So I'll log out.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions? Okay.
Dr. Gatcher is saying that the lecturer has the option to allow multiple submissions. So we should keep that in mind.
Yeah. All right, just note that if the lecturer allows multiple submissions, you're going to get a similarity report that shows 100%.
I thought that there was something about saving to Turnitin and that you got the 100% if you saved, but if you didn't save the document, then it would not show up in the percentages.
Or if you were looking at the screen that Ms. Tugwell was showing from the student facing end, it just only shows, based on our license, it just only shows a submit button. So there are no other options that are showing up. When we log in as a student, that says that we can save it. I know typically Turnitin would allow students to submit like 3 times typically, but when we tested a paper and went in to submit, the only option we were seeing was submit. There was no save option. So I don't know if because we were entering as, we were just entering as individuals who were testing as opposed to having a student ID, I don't know if that accounts for that. But when we tried to submit, being a student that was registered in a course that we set up, we did not see that option to save instead of submit.
Okay, all right. And besides, I mean, the license may also have changed, UI's license.
Right, and I know there's some changes have occurred with Turnitin, so I'm not sure if that's one of the changes, but when we went to log in as a student and to test the submission piece, we were not seeing a save option. And I don't think when Mr. Gould showed it a while ago that I saw that either. So I'm not really sure. But I know typically Turnitin would have allowed 3 submissions and then you'd have to wait 24 hours. I know the fact that a student can get a 100% because they have previously submitted documentation, it would be because the lecturer has allowed them to submit more than once, which would then trigger the 100% in terms of the similarity index. But in terms of saving the assignment instead of submitting it, we were not seeing that when we logged in as students.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. All right, so I'm going to log in from the lecturer's point of view. I'm hoping that you're able to see my screen. Again, this is the login into Turnitin. By now, the lecturer would have had an account which they created using their email and a password. So you would click login. Once you log in to Turnitin, it takes a moment or so. It will take you into your classroom. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to demonstrate how to add a class. So as you can see from my screen, we already have a class and there's a class ID for that class. Now I'm going to add a class so that you can see. So as I said, the buttons are pretty visible. So you click on add a class, a drop-down menu would populate and you would go ahead and create the class. I'm just gonna quickly try to demonstrate that. So I'm gonna create a class called test. I'm going to use an enrollment key of just zeros. Then I'm gonna choose my subject area. And then I'm gonna choose my students. So let's just say graduates. And I have no option in terms of choosing a start date because my start date automatically becomes the day that I create the class. And then I would click submit. So I fill in my information, create my enrollment key, and click submit. So once the class is created, you'll see the class ID and the enrollment key. So I'm gonna click continue. Now, a question was raised earlier about whether or not you can have more than one class. As you can see in my Turnitin account, you will see that we have 2 classes. The one that was created before and the one that I just created. So what would happen is that you would then give students the enrollment key for each class because there are 2 different classes and you want the assignments to be directed to the specific class. Just some key things that we want to pay attention to. To the right of the screen, you'll see an edit button that looks like a gear button. We're gonna click on that. And the reason I'm doing that is because if you want to find out what your enrollment key in case you didn't take it down, you can always find that information by clicking the edit button. And to find your class ID, the class ID is always to the left of the name. So those are 2 things that are pretty easy to find. So let's go into the test class itself. So I'm now in the test class. And as you notice, it says before you or your students can submit a paper, you first need to create an assignment. So Ms. Tugwell showed you from the student end what it looks like as a student. Now from our end, as a lecturer, I'm showing you what it looks like. We're gonna create an assignment, and I hope I'm not going too fast. I know it's 15 minutes over, so I'm trying to go as fast as possible. So we click add an assignment. It takes a moment to populate. And so while it populates, by then you would have had an idea of what type of assignment you want to create. So we're creating a test assignment. So let's call our assignment test. My start date is the 8th. I can actually change the start date for the assignment. So it's not the date that I create the assignment that is the start date. That's the case only when you create a class. So I could change my start date to any time. All right. Then we click submit. If you notice, there are two options. Allow only file types that Turnitin can check for similarity, or allow any file type. All right. So I'm going to click submit. So I now have an assignment that has been created for my test class. Now, because an assignment has been created, while I was creating this new test class, Ms. Tugwell went ahead and she enrolled as a student because she was able to see the class enrollment, the class number and the enrollment ID, and she's now a student in this class. Now, this class does not have any assignments that have been submitted yet because it was just created. So we're gonna go back and we're going to go back to our assignments. And if you notice, the status says 0 assignments submitted. Now, there are 3 important actions that you can take once you have created an assignment. You can edit the assignment. You can actually submit on a student's behalf. So let me click so I can show you. So I can choose from my computer. I can choose from Dropbox. I can choose from Google Drive, and I can fill in the information and can submit on behalf of my students. Now you notice from the lecturer's standpoint, there's no option to save without submitting. You can't view the similarity report unless you submit. So I just want to make that clear. And this is if you're submitting a single file upload on behalf of your students. So you go to Actions, View. It shows you the 3 options. It will show you the 3 options that you have under More Actions, Edit, Submit, and you can also delete an assignment. All right. You can also look at your class list by clicking on Students. You can add a student. So if I wanted to add Ms. Tugwell instead of having her self-enroll, it's a simple process, her name, her email address, and that's how I would add her. All right. Now, let's go back to our page, our main page. So on our main page, it has our account settings. So you can go in and change how many items you want to see per page, how many file uploads. So single file, multiple file uploads. In other words, if you check multiple file uploads, your students will be able to upload multiple files, which might mean the student can submit the same assignment several times. So it's when you click multiple file upload that allows for that. Now let's go back to all our classes that we have so far. I'm going to go into the first class that we set up because I believe we have a paper that has been submitted in this class. So a test paper was submitted and I'm going to click on it. So it shows you what the workflow looks like when you are in Turnitin. So for this test scenario, we submitted a copy of the Turnitin Instructor's Manual from UWI. What it is in essence is the Turnitin information that's available, we made a version for UII. It's basically the same thing. It just has information like how to get to the administrator and so on. So this is the paper that I submitted. Now, to the right is my match overview. Let me do it again. When I click on it, it shows where the information came from. Because this document comes from Turnitin, it's going to show 84% of this paper came from Turnitin. It also shows that this paper was submitted to the University of the West Indies. And the reason it's probably showing that is because it was submitted in this class. If, for example, I wanted to download my Similarity report, I click on the download arrow. And here are the options. I can download my digital receipt, because Turnitin provides a receipt for every upload that you have. I can download my originally submitted file as well. So to get our receipt, we click on the download arrow, click on the digital receipt, we can download the original paper. But what if I want to download, download other documents? And I'll get to that in a moment. Now, what I've clicked on is the Similarity index for all the sources that have come up in this paper. And so as you can see, Turnitin provides you with a solution to how to address this particular issue. All right. So it will say, this is what you can do. And it gives you an example of when a student has submitted a paper in the past and what you can do. So it does provide you with examples of how you can fix the problem. Again, in this paper, it shows the paper was submitted to graduate studies, a postgraduate school rather. It was submitted to a university, and Turnitin goes and gives you other places that it has been submitted. All right. And so that's your Originality report. Now, let's click on online grading report. When you click on that, what you will see is we don't have the grading option. So if I pull that up, it's only going to show like an Excel sheet. And so it says grading service is not available for this assignment. And the reason it's not available is because we don't have that feature in our license. All right. You can also refresh your grade report if we had that option, but as you know, in this case, we don't. Again, let's view the assignment. Let's download it. Let's see if it opens. Just want to show you the download. So as you can see, with practice, you'll become very versed at using Turnitin. It's taking a moment. Okay. And it downloads the paper as was submitted. And this is if you want to grade the paper offline outside of Turnitin. You can also opt to hide the similarity layers if you have already made a determination as to what you want to do with your students. Now, somebody has asked if you can set your personal acceptable similarity level. We don't see an option for setting that within Turnitin, but I think as a lecturer, you can determine what percentage you would accept as not being plagiarism. So you could essentially make that Turnitin, that determination, but you would not be able to input that percentage in Turnitin. So in other words, you wouldn't be able to say to Turnitin, okay, if a student has 24%, they have not plagiarized. That would have to be a personal determination that you have made. We can take one more question and then we have to go. We have kind of gone over the time.
Any questions?
Typed it in again, but I was asking, you had mentioned this thing about these 5 words that we could put in so that the student's name wouldn't be included. Where is that option, or where do we set that up, please?
All right, so when you're setting up the assignment itself, let's see if we can go. Let's go back to the assignment. One moment, please.
Thanks.
So in the edit section, all right, so when you're setting up the assignment, these are the options that you have available. You can generate a similarity report. You can exclude quoted materials from the similarity index for all papers in your assignment. So in other words, once a student has a quotation in their paper, you can tell Turnitin to ignore that. So the quotation would not come up in the percentages. Now, when you're grading the paper itself, or when you're looking over the paper itself, that's when you would click on how many words you want to exclude. So let's go back to the paper. That's one option. Trying to find it. Okay. All right, so here it is. Let me go to it. So it's under filters and settings, and you can exclude certain things. Let me exit out and go back so that you can see it. So in the first example, or the first option that I showed you, you can exclude certain things. So for example, quotations, you can exclude that when you're setting up the assignment. But in terms of the number of words you want to exclude, you can only do that once you're grading the paper itself. So you click on the filter option, which is this icon that looks like a filter, and then you can click on exclude quotes, exclude bibliography, and then you can put the number of words you want to exclude. In a previous example, I'd said that Turnitin had excluded 5 words. It's up to you the number of words you want to exclude. So it can be 5 words. That's pretty reasonable. Again, it's your determination. So the reason they would say 5 words is because that 5 words would typically take in, for example, your name or something else. Anything beyond that, then it's likely that the student could plagiarize. You can also exclude a certain percentage of the paper. Suppose you say 10% or 5%. and then you can apply your changes. And then you will see that it has excluded the percentage that you suggested, so the similarity match would be less. Filter and settings, you click on the percentage you want to exclude or the number of words you want to exclude, and then a new report would be generated. So you click new report, you refresh it, and a new report would be created. Again, because we made changes, the report is not available. It takes time, and then you can download it. All right. If there are no more questions, I think that's our presentation on Turnitin.
All right, just one more question. That 5 words thing, excluding 5 words, do you have to tell them what words you're excluding? So for instance, you said your name. How does it know to leave out your name?
It doesn't give you the option to input any specific words. It just gives you a number of words that will not be included in the similarity check. And typically, when you put 5 words, it will automatically not count the person's name.
Okay, all right.
So it's not like it's not like it's gonna give you an option to state what you want to exclude. It doesn't do that.
I have a question, Moji Anderson. What happens if there are 2 lecturers on one course?
Explain, what do you mean? What do you mean?
So we decide who is going to set up this assignment and set up this class and all of that?
All right, well, if there are 2 lecturers for a course, then the way that you could work it out, you could have, the other lecturer would have the credentials to the Turnitin course. Is that how you're doing it? Because you would have to make that determination. We couldn't tell you how you want to set up your class. So I'm not quite sure I'm understanding what you mean.
Okay, don't worry about it. Thanks.
Okay. We know we have an option for a TA account. So unless you would make one of you a teaching assistant and one person would have the main account, or the main lecturer would provide the credentials to the other lecturer. So that's a determination that you would have to make. Well, I hope you'll be.
Sorry, I have a very basic question, Michael Barnett here. Now, to my knowledge, just to get access to the Turnitin account that UE has, we're supposed to be sent an email from MITS e-learning. Is that correct? So, can anyone hear me? Hello?
Yes, we're hearing you, Doc.
Okay, so, all right, I just want to know. What I was saying is that to set up my Turnitin account, you know, maybe I've gotten the wrong end of the stick, but I thought that we had to do this through MITS. I sent a request to them a couple of weeks back, haven't heard anything. So is there a way of maybe, I don't know.
At the very start, Dr. Palmer had said that yes, you do need to get permission from MITS. It is once you get permission from MITS that you do all that she's showing us here this evening.
Right, yeah, I came on a little bit late, so I missed that. And I thought that was the case. It's just what is very frustrating is that, you know, it's been about two weeks.
Well, in yesterday's faculty board meeting, the dean told us that you should contact Dr. Delroy Chevers if you're having trouble with MITS. So perhaps you should tell Dr. Chevers, and he has some other direct links with MITS, so maybe he can help you.
Yeah, well, yeah, I was thinking about that, but I was just wondering with the library staff here if there was you know, another way. And of course, I missed the beginning of the meeting. So thanks a lot for that, all of you.
Can students pre-submit their work to check themselves? It looks as if we've lost the audio, but I see Miss Togwell still typing, so perhaps she can type that for us. She would respond to Dr. Martin Hall. Though based on what I've heard this evening, I don't think so. I think once the lecturer sets them up, then they can do it for themselves. But I don't think students can just enter Turnitin on their own. Certainly UE says it doesn't have the licensing capacity, thousands of students. So it was MITS actually that suggested that the lecturers submit on behalf of students. All right, Ms. Tugwell just responded to Dr. Martin Hall. Can students pre-submit their work to check themselves? She said they will need to be enrolled in order to submit. All right, if there are no other questions, do either of our speakers have anything to say just in closing? But if not, then I would just thank everybody. No, students cannot pre-submit. We can follow student, no, Dr. Martin Hall, students can't pre-submit. All right, we're kind of falling apart here. So I just want to thank Dr. Palmer and Ms. Tugwell for coming here and for helping us in the Faculty of Social Sciences to understand the Turnitin a little bit better. And it was a very useful presentation. I'm seeing quite a few comments of people thanking them and saying that they feel that they've been helped. Also remember that we have this presentation recorded and it will be available in the Dean's office and in the HRD Graduate Programs Unit. If you email me at spsw.assessment.center@gmail.com, that's SPSW, Sociology, Psychology, Social Work, .assessment.center@gmail.com, I'll send it to you. And of course, Keisha Sherman Howell, she will be able to tell you how to get it from the Dean's office. So with that, I would like to thank everybody, as I said, especially Ms. Tugwell and Dr. Palmer for being here. And great job, very informative. And we'll call on you again if we have any problems, ladies. All right, thank you so much. Applause. I'm going to sign out from this meeting now. Okay, so thanks, bye.